Okay. Good evening, everybody. As Bill said, I'm Tom Reed. I'm part of the Civil Air Patrol. The Civil Air Patrol is the leasee of the Nike missile site. We get it from the state. We have to pay $1 a year, and we have the lease for 10 years with the option to renew. But the key is we have to keep the place maintained. And so what we decided to do was to maintain it. We decided to restore the site. So that's what we're working on. So what I'm going to do tonight, I'm using the slides. I think some of you who visited before might have seen these slides, but I updated them. So I'm going to give you a little bit about the history of the site, and I'm going to ask for you guys who have been there for a long time, if you guys want to interject and tell me about some of the things you remember from back then, that'd be great. Talk about the restoration, what we've done so far, and then I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the future, what we hope to be able to do with the site, hopefully by this fall. So I'm going to go ahead and present, and then let me know if you see what I'm presenting. Okay, you should see a slide that says BA-79 Nike missile site. Okay,
Yes.
thumbs up from Aaron. So, all right. Okay, so first quiz. You don't have to answer it. What does BA stand for?
Big ass.
For Baltimore. And the 79 is the way they numbered the bases was it's 79 degrees from the center of Baltimore. But they use the degrees as only 100 degrees. So it goes from 0 to 99. So BA 79 is northwest of Baltimore. So that's why you number. So if you go, you're seeing some of the future slides, you'll see other ones named BA, and then you have the W for Washington, C, Chicago. If you ever make it up to San Francisco, SF-88 is actually a site that's owned by the National Park Service. It actually has missiles, operating elevators, and launch pads. Well worth the trip. And I have a cat down here right now. You just had to wait till the presentation starts to start bothering me. So. Okay, let's see if I can get this thing done. Okay. First image, that is the BA-79 site, probably 1957. The buildings to the bottom left are still there. There's actually a third building that in that oval area where the mound is, there's now another building there. So I'll give you a little history right here of the buildings, and then we'll go on. So you can see bottom left is the generator building. So they could take it off commercial power and run the generator. The one to the right of that is the missile assembly building. You can actually see an Ajax missile pointing into the door. They would build the missiles there. They would come in canisters. And I think in the image at the far end, you can see I think those are the canisters. They'd come in canisters. They'd build them in that building. And then you can see a little road coming out of the building on the backside, goes around and goes into that area over here. If you can see my cursor, that's where they would fuel it. And I have some pictures of them fueling it up. And then it would come out, and then they would put it, actually, these are the launchers, and you can see the missiles in launch position, but then they would put them underneath and store them underground. So that's what it looked like when it was Ajax. Shortly after this, they started getting Hercules missiles. And then by 63, the Ajax were gone and was only Hercules. So we're talking a little about those. So it started back in the 1951. They actually had anti-aircraft guns. 1990 millimeter guns were deployed around Baltimore. By 1953, they just started deploying the Nike Ajax. So the whole program was called Nike. And then the first generation missile was the Ajax. It was actually pretty much the first generation anti-aircraft missile in the world. Started building that. They put in 265 sites around the continental US, mostly around cities, but other strategic areas like SAC bases were a main area where they put them. And then also up in Alaska. And then they started deploying them into different countries. like Italy, France, South Korea, the number of places they were sent.
Excuse me for a second, Tom. If everybody could mute themselves, that way when there's any coughs or anything that occur, it won't change the audio.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Yeah, go ahead and mute when you can. But if you have a question, feel free to interrupt, or you can take a note and we can answer it at the end. So for BA 79, the Army used eminent domain to try to get the land. The story I heard was they were trying to get it from a farmer for like a buck an acre or something real cheap. And the farmer sued and he won the suit. So he got a lot more money for it. But I also heard that the farmer pretty much soured the relationship with the community. And we talked to a lady down on Offutt. Now, was she on Offutt Street or down a little farther? She actually married an Army person from the base. And she says she couldn't go to the local community church. That's how sour the relation was between the Army and the community. So anyhow, so they started building the site in 1954. We know it was active in 1956 because in one of the concrete, the steps going down at the top, PFC Crowley actually etched his name into the concrete and he wrote 1956. So we know it was active in 1956. What's interesting with this site, it's called a double site. A normal site would have 3 sections. Each section would have launchers. This was a double site. It actually has 6 sections, so 24 launchers in total. There's a couple of them around the country, but this one's kind of unique. What's also unique, and you'll see it a little later, was we have 3 different styles of magazines. So the first 2 they built for Ajax, and the elevator is 40 feet long. Well, the Hercules is 33 feet long. It could fit on the elevator, no problem. Well, the Hercules is coming in and it's 39 plus feet. So it's closer to 40 feet. It actually can't be used on the elevator on the first 2 sections. The elevator is too small. So if you go to the back side of the site, they modified the elevator and you can see where they added 4 feet to the elevator. So they could actually put the Hercules down inside the magazines. However, for those 2, the Hercules and the launcher is too heavy for the elevator. So they actually had to add an extra launch pad, and I'll show you that in a second. And then the final 2 sections are for Hercules specifically. So there, the elevator is 52 feet long. So we actually have 3 different styles there. So also kind of interesting. So as you saw in the picture from 1957, there was 24 launchers. They actually transitioned 16 of them over to Hercules. And then by 63, the Ajax were all gone. And so they actually kind of modified the site a little and they put a fence around 4 of the sections. And then by then they had the Hercules. What's unique for Hercules is they were nuclear tipped. Okay, Ajax conventional only. So no worries. It had 1 fence around it, more than willing to let the public come in and see everything. The Hercules came in and they were nuclear armed. So we had nuclear warheads at the site. So they had to put a second fence line in. They also put guard dogs, not guard dogs, attack dogs. And that's what you talk to some of the people that used to work at different sites. That was their biggest concern. If there was an alert, where were the dogs? Because the dogs were trained to attack anything, sometimes even attack their handlers. So anyway, so by 63, it was starting to head over towards National Guard. It was Army, National Guard for a while. Army had the Ajax, the conventional warhead missiles, and then the Army had the new stuff. Army always gets the new stuff. National Guard gets the older stuff. Well, once the Hercules were all in and the Ajax were gone, the Army gave the Army National Guard the Hercules, which included the warheads. So you had our weekend warriors. I like them, but they're weekend warriors. They were actually in charge of nuclear warheads in your neighborhood. So we had the Hercules go until about 74. By 74, we weren't worried about Soviet bombers coming over the North Pole. We were worried about ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles. These weren't designed to go after those. So they were becoming obsolete. Plus, there was a war going on in Vietnam. The Army had more important things to do. So they pretty much shut down the whole Nike program. There was a Nike Zeus. So it was a third generation, which the Army was trying to develop for to go against ICBMs. And they did test it, but they never put it into production. And so that shut down. So anyhow, so 74, the lower part of the base is closed down. They still use the upper part. And it was still used by the Army National Guard for a while. You can see it was the 70th General Supply Company and then some other things. By the 1980s, and this is probably what you guys love to hear, they had leaking transformers, you had fuel oil spills, there was asbestos, lead paint, all kinds of good stuff. So the Army's like gave it away. They gave it to the state after they fixed most of this stuff. Now, when we took it over, when I say we, the Civil Air Patrol, when we took it over, I think in 2013, there were still some fuel tanks underground that were leaking. So the state came in and pulled those out. But our water is non-potable because there are some trace elements of petroleum in the water. So anyhow, so it was used by the state for a little bit. You can still, there's still a state police use it occasionally for the dogs. For a while, the state correction department used it for training. So most of the buildings above, the two big buildings at the top of the site were made into classrooms, admin buildings, rooms and stuff like that. And some of you probably were around when they tore down the radar towers. We have some pictures of that. And then it says 2014, we got it. 2018, we started restoring it. 2022, we're still restoring it. So here's a kind of an image of all the sites that were around Baltimore and DC. So you can see we're up near the top, BA 79, there's a BA 92, and you see how they're kind of around the city. There was a book out there, it's called Rings of Steel. And that was it, Rings of Supersonic Steel, because these went over Mach. They were Mach 3, Mach 3.5. Just on a side note, if you look, you see W92 down in Rockville. That was recently owned by NIST, which is a federal government agency. Well, they just sold it to a commercial real estate company, and it's going to get developed into apartments. So they got really good money because it's right down in the middle of where everything's building out. So they sold it. So a lot of these places are gone. Some you still see some remains. Some is just a park, and or you can see some roads that used to be called Nike. And that's about it. And I've been told our site is one of the best preserved on the East Coast. Now, if you go down to the Everglades, they have a site down there that's opened up on Sundays. You can get a tour. Those are above ground because of the water level. They couldn't put them underground. So it's the only site that I know of that are above ground. But also Alaska, I think they're partially above ground too. So, and you can see here, and I can send these slides out. I can give them to Bill and you guys can look at them. This one includes how many pits were in there. Pits is another name they gave it for the magazine. They called them pits, and then the radars. So this is how the system was supposed to work. So when it was Ajax, you had your acquisition radar, which was the first thing to acquire the target, Soviet bombers. Then you had the target tracking radar, which would track it. And then you had a ranging, which would give you the range and height. And then you had another radar system where that actually would track and guide the missile. So the way it's set up, you could only launch one missile at a time. But I'll show you a slide. So what they did is they set two systems up. So our site could launch two missiles at the same time towards different targets. And if you look to the far left, it's a two-stage missile. Both of the missiles are 2-stage. So the first missile is going to drop off after about 4 seconds. It's just getting it up to speed. And then the second missile will engage. But that first stage is going to fall somewhere. For our site, they're all pointed north. So it's going to fall in Baltimore County somewhere. So that's one reason why they never launched any missiles from any sites that I know, except for maybe Hawaii, because they were pointed out over the water. So they did all their testing down in Texas. So we never launched anything here from the site. Did a lot of alerts, but no launches. This is out of the San Francisco site, SF-88. So you can see the low power, which is a low power. And then there's a high power, which for Hercules, which gave you much better range. These actually were up on the hill. And they said there was like an earthquake or a mudslide or something, and they slid down the hill. So this is part of just in their right next to where the missiles are actually at. For Granite and for all the sites, the radars had at least be a mile away from the launchers, because the missiles shot up so fast. The tracking radar for the missile tracking radar couldn't catch it. So it had to be far enough away that it could track it as it went up, because it went up so fast. So that's why when you're down at our sites, you see that big field at the one end with the fence around it. That's where the radars were. That's where the battery commander was. And this is inside the radar battery. There's some good YouTube videos out there showing how to track. If you look in the picture to the right, it's a plotting board, but it's all no digital. So those two, you see like two little things near the top, those are just like trackers, and they move. The radar, the computer actually moves them, and then those little arms kind of slide in. And one is the missile, one is the target, and when they come together, they're supposed to blow up. So here's what an Ajax section would look like. Remember, there's 3 sections to a site. So this is the above ground. There were 4 launchers. One of the launchers is actually on the elevator itself. Oops, let me see. Okay, never mind. So you have that, you have launcher there, then you have 3 other launchers. The plan was, if they actually had a fire these, they would launch it, the first one off the one on the elevator. Then they would go down, grab another missile, put it on that launcher, take it back up, launch it, do the same thing. They did that just in case if the launcher malfunctioned, the missile malfunctioned, didn't leave the launcher, the elevator malfunctioned, you still had 3 other missiles you could operate. And it's in here, I've heard anywhere from 9 to 11 missiles per section. So you have that, and then underneath is where they stored them, tested them, and did their maintenance. If you see, there's like a little rail system, and you can see this much better if you go to San Francisco. We don't have any, but I don't think we're ever going to get these rails. We're still trying to get a missile, but there's not a lot of them, and there's a lot of paperwork and money involved. So anyhow, they would put them on a little, there'd be a missile rail, and that's what the missile would be on. And then they could put that onto this little rail system and push it onto the elevator, and the elevator, push it down, and then push it back off. And it was a pretty slick thing. They moved pretty easy. So, and then next slide. This is more underground. And again, if you ever come out to the site, at the end, I'll tell you about if we can do private tours, or if you want to come out and volunteer. Underground, you had the missiles. You can see a magazine hatch, escape hatch ladder going up. This box is where all the hydraulics were kept. And then over here in the front was the control room and another escape hatch. This is what it originally was going to be. They had to go in and out of these hatches, but they figured it took too much time to get all the personnel down the ladders, and it was dangerous. So they built steps going down. So let me give you just a little bit more about the Ajax, you can read it. Again, it's the first reliable, semi-reliable. It's the first generation surface to air missile. It was designed to shoot down manned bombers. It could go up to 100,000 feet, but it only could go about 30 miles. So again, we're trying to protect Baltimore, and we're launching these against bombers, and it was okay for a while, but you had to be pretty accurate because you only needed one bomber to get through with a hydrogen bomb, and Baltimore was gone. So again, like I said, it was a 2-stage rocket. The first stage was liquid fueled, and it used a red fuming nitric acid, JP4, and some words I can't pronounce. And it was very hazardous. So when you see pictures, they're all in hazmat gear. So pretty good speed, limited range, and it was conventional. And again, one of the problems with Ajax was it was radar guided. Radars weren't that accurate back in the 50s. So it would probably see a formation of bombers, but it couldn't pick out individual bombers. So the fear was they would send this up, it would explode inside the formation and actually not hit anything. So they're thinking, it's like, okay, what can take out a formation of bombers? Nuclear warhead, that should work. That's what they went to. So Ajax was actually deployed. Fort Meade was one of the first places to deploy the Ajax. It was above ground. You see a little history. In 1955, they accidentally launched one over the newly completed BWI Parkway, and it kind of exploded. So, and then in 58 in New York, they had a serious one, which one blew up and it caused the other ones to blow up, and we ended up losing. It says 10 soldiers here, but I think a number of them were civilians working on one of the missiles. So, but it was 10 people were killed. And in the third bullet down, you see it says SNAP, short notice annual practice. This is how they would certify. They would get a notice, very short notice. They would have like 48 hours to get all their gear and head down to Fort Bliss, Texas. There they would have to, their team, they would pick a team from the site. They would have to assemble the missile, test it, and then launch it. If they were successful in launching it, the whole unit was considered qualified for that year. So they said stories down at Fort Bliss, because remember, all those first stages would fall off. It just looked like a porcupine field, just all these first stages stuck in the sand. So we actually had a Colonel Zhang was stationed there. He was, he was a sergeant when he was there. He was a missile technician. He went down from one of these snap drills, and he was the first enlisted person to operate, to be the commander of the launch. And he actually got a little plaque, and so he donated that. So we have that in our display area. So here's a picture of them fueling the Ajax. If you look, the trailer's at an angle. And if you come to the site, you see a concrete barrier raised up, and then you see a hole in the concrete, and that's where they would put the wheels, so it'd be at an angle so you didn't have any bubbles. And this is pure Army. You see the people that are fueling it are all hazmated. Everybody watching, no such thing. So if anything happens, the guys in hazmat suits are totally fine. Remember I said about the radar? They could launch 2 missiles at a time. If you look at the left, you see up at the top, there's a set of radars. And then slightly down, almost down to the middle, you see a second set of radars. So you could have 2 sections launching a missile at the same time. And since you had 6 sections, you could just rotate those through, and you could be and these things would only take like 2 minutes to get the target. So you could send up every 2 minutes, you'd be sending up 2 missiles. And what would happen is they would launch towards the north. Once the first stage would fall off, then they could go in any direction. So there were some blind spots, but that's how it worked. The one to the right, that's when they switched over to Hercules. Now you see only one set of radars in the middle, and there's a real big one. That's your HIPAR. So that's the one that would do the acquisition, and then you had your tracking, your ranging, and then your missile guidance one. So now we can only do one at a time. But they went down to 4 sections, so now it's only 16 missiles. You can see the difference between the two. One's a lot. I mean, the Ajax was just like an arrow. The Hercules, actually, the first stage was actually 4 Ajax rockets powered on it. So this thing's going much faster, much farther. It can make it to Pennsylvania easy. So that's where Pennsylvania would get the fallout. So a little bit of the Hercules, again, supposed to go after manned bombers. It did have a surface-to-surface mode. So again, so they were in Europe, so they could actually be used to take out ground targets. So this one's 41 feet long. And so again, they had to mess around with the elevators. Now on this one, both first stage and second stage were solid fueled. So where they did the fueling, they put in a building, because now the warhead is so heavy, it's hard to put that on there. So they actually built a building that has a crane in it, so they could actually put the warhead on the missile. And that's called the Warhead Assembly Building. So we have some pictures of the nuclear warhead. It's pretty good size. It weighs like 3,900 pounds. So it's not small. So this one can go Mach 3.6. The other one was 2.5. Interesting who built it: Western Electric, Bell Labs, and Douglas Aircraft. So, and it can go about 100 miles. What's interesting with a nuclear warhead that detonates in the air, you're not going to get as much fallout, because when a nuclear warhead detonates close to the ground, it takes all the debris and sends that up in the atmosphere. That's your fallback, your fallout. An air burst, not near as much fallout. And these were smaller. They actually they had 3 different sizes. It was like 2 kiloton, 20 kiloton, and 40 kiloton. 40 kilotons, still pretty good sized. Bigger than Hiroshima. And there's, you can see your high par. This is some of your pictures. And real quick, it used to be, the Army loves to change their designators all the time. So the 17th Artillery MD, it's the Army National Guard. Ajax was Battery A, and then Battery B was the Hercules. If anybody remembers seeing that front gate, that's where the radars were. Here you can see when the towers were still there. They took off the radars, but the towers there, the buildings were there. There's some pictures back then. And then now everything's gone. All you see is the parking lot. I think the basketball court. So this is at the other end. This is the launch area. This is looking back 2001. There's a Paul Freeman came by and did a bunch of research. We actually had somebody from, I think, the University of Maryland came out and he did a study. I think Bill, you know more about that one. I think we have his paper. So these are the 6 sections. So we had double site, so 6 sections. You can see it's not too bad a shape. Everything's rusted. Now you can start seeing that there's a lot of stuff growing up. It's getting pretty bad. This is pretty recent. You see, we don't have the plane there yet. So it's pre-2018. We haven't done any work yet on it. So this is what it looks like when we started. We didn't even know what it was down there. It was so full of debris. So that's actually one of the elevators with the doors closed. This is looking down the site. So you can see 3 yellow things. Those are the air vents for 3 of the sections. And then the state or somebody put a metal fence around it that was all falling down and rusted. This is looking from the bottom of the site up. You can see the little, on the close up is this is one of the blast pads. And then here's the air vent. escape hatch, and then one of the elevators. These are some of our, we had some trailers. We finally got rid of those. So, and that's my truck. My truck's on a lot of these pictures. So what we're trying to do today is we're trying to preserve the site from any further decay. So we're trying to, anything that's above ground that's metal, we're trying to paint, keep it from rusting. We're trying to get rid of most of the plant life. Never going to be able to get rid of it all because the asphalt is so bad. We want to get it to look back what it looks like in the mid 1960s. We have some pictures when it was there with the Hercules, so we're repainting it to see what it looked like in those pictures. We would like to make that warhead assembly building, and I'll show you some pictures shortly, make that into a display room. We would love to have a missile in there, but at least get some displays to talk about the history of the site, what the various things were like, some mementos we have, and get that in there. We had a couple people that were looking to try to build a mock-up of an Ajax or Hercules. That hasn't borne fruit yet, but we keep asking. And then what we want to do is open it up to the public. Because again, one of CAP, so Air Patrol's missions is aerospace education. So we want to open it up to the public. I'm looking at, once a month on a Sunday. They can come down and see it. We do tours. And there's a lot of people don't even know these existed. And there's a lot more people didn't know there was nuclear warheads within 30 miles of Baltimore. So on the left, picture on the left, that's Joe Zhang. Like I said, he came down and did a tour, talked to us for a while. And there's a book on the table. It's like a yearbook from 1965. And it was really kind of sad. He was looking through it and he'd go, oh yeah, I know this guy. He passed away. I know this guy. Yeah, he's gone. I know this guy. It was like, oh, but he's still doing strong. He lives up in Pennsylvania now. We had another guy who was at Edgewood, and he had some stuff. It's actually sitting next to me. And he wanted to come see the site, but then COVID hit, and then he passed away before he could come visit the site. So we have a standing invitation for his family to come out and visit it. So hopefully we can get them out there soon. So again, stage one, this is what we have been doing. Most of this is done, is scrape off the rust and then paint it. These are the blast pads that were at the Bonema Beach launcher. And those are some of my volunteers. Every one of the pits in the magazine was full of water. The one had 7 feet, the rest had 11 feet of water in. So we got a commercial sized pump and we pumped them all out. And you can see on the left, that one's, you can see there's still some water down in the elevator well. So what you're looking at is that's the elevator in the down position, and those are steps going underneath the elevator itself. So we pumped everything out. You can see how bad the rust is. Above ground is we took, those trees are all gone. We had a lot of good brush pile fires out there. We also had to get the topsoil off. We had 40 years worth of topsoil building up on top of the asphalt. So basically manual labor. We had scrapers, shovels, and wheelbarrows because we didn't want to bring in heavy equipment because it would just ruin the asphalt. So you can see what we're trying to do is, again, like I said, get it back to the 60s. So you see on the left, we've started working on it. On the right is a finished product. This one is an actual elevator in the upright position. We don't know why, but 3 of the sections, the elevator is up and the doors are hanging down. So when you go down into the pit, you see the doors hanging down. On the other side, the far side, the elevator is down and the doors are locked closed. Don't know why they did it, but it's the way they did it. So again, this is what we're trying to go back to. This is Joe Zhang holding this picture. And this is from 1965, Battery B. This is the Hercules. That's the rail system. This is one of the air vents. And you can see it on the right. Here's the air vent. And then, so we're repainting it, what it looked like. And in the later picture, you can see we're starting to paint the curb with the stripes. We have this painted, the bigger air vent in stripes. So we're working on that. We need to get ourselves on the left. You can see it looks like a lightning rod. So we can see if we can find some of those or make them. Here's underneath. Some of these you're going to see pictures from SF88, and this is what we want to do. So on the left is ours. It looks like, again, it has changed because we've been able to paint some of this. On the right, it looks like SF88. Left, this is us still pumping it out. On the right is what it's going to go back to. We actually have this one, the ladders painted back. We painted it yellow because you can see we tried to use what we could. If we saw paint on it, that's what we painted it back to. So the ladders were painted yellow. We painted them yellow. The walls were a blue and white. We painted it back to blue and white. SF88, they're more of a green. We didn't see that here, so we kept it as close as we could to what it looked like when they abandoned it. This is one of the elevator wells. Right now, it's all that rust is gone. We have new railings up. This has all been painted. Problem is, we do have water comes in when it rains. It comes in through the elevator doors because all the seals have rotted away. So every 6 months, we got to put a pump down here and pump it out. That's our site. Just when we got finished pumping everything out, it looks much better. It's actually pretty dry, pretty good. Some of you guys have been in it already. This is what it looks like in SF88. They have missiles in there. This is going back to the control room. Again, on the right, kind of should reverse these. On the right is what ours look like. You can see all the rust on the blast doors. Those have all been painted now. We have all this is completed. This is our control room door. That's been done in the one pit. We want to open 2 magazines up to the public, so we're restoring 2 of them. This one, I think, I can't tell if it's the one on the left or on the right. We finished one, the other one we're still working on. And on the right, that's how they controlled the missiles. So there was 4 missiles, there was 4 launchers. That's how they could make sure that when it goes green, that missile was ready. Left is what our warhead assembly building looked like before we started. It now looks much better. I was going to go get a picture of it, and I didn't put it in here. I apologize, but it's all been painted. It looks pretty sharp. And one last shot of that, and then just some other arbitrary pictures. Again, we painting all this. This is all painted. We're all starting to put the asphalt blacktop sealer down. I just like this picture in the snow. I thought it was pretty sharp. This is what it looked like in 2020. This is from Google Earth. You can go onto Google Maps, pull up BA79, and then go to the satellite mode, and you can see. I don't know how recent they are, but you can see what us working on it here. And then a little closer. So we started painting these lines. You can see we haven't painted the elevator black yet. And then this is what it looks like in 2022 in the spring. So you can see this is the one that was in that other picture. That one's all done. This one's all done. That's done. So basically they're all done. And we started putting blacktop sealer around it. So still got work to do, but it's starting to look pretty sharp. Where do we want to go in the future? So again, we want to continue to work on the site. This year's project, we have battery B section A. That's the one, go back one. That's this one on the top left. That's section A, battery B. This is section A, battery A. Those are the 2 we want to open up to the public. And if we do private tours, those are the ones we let people go down into the pit to look around. Battery A, that one's pretty much done. Battery B still has some work to do. We also want to paint the assembly building, which is this building at the very bottom. Right now it's painted, it's a yellow, it's our tan. but underneath it's green, and that's what it used to be painted. So we want to paint that one. I want to start working on the displays. So I got to start getting smart on that. And again, like I said, I want to open it up to the public on a monthly basis. So I'm looking for some docents who can help with tours or just be there. I need to come up with a marketing campaign. Once we get closer, I need to figure out, how do you market this? How do you get it out there to know that it's going to be opened on certain days and that we have tours? So that's something I need to work on. And then I'm not good at researching. So again, I'd like to know more about the history of this site, the whole program, but also about this site in particular. What's unique about it? I would love to hear some stories from people who lived in the area. And I know, Bill, we tried to do that before with one of the folks who was living there at the time it was operational. I would love to just have some, just give me some short stories and we can put them in a book. So when people come down to visit, they can just flip through and listen to some of the stories by the people in the public, you know, who lived during that time, what it was like to have these bases operational. So this is my last slide. I have no idea how much time I used, and I apologize if I went over, which it looks like I did a little. So everything we've done has been with volunteers and donations. And then we thank you. Last year, you guys gave us a donation early on. We appreciate it. We're doing fine this year. It's going to be, what we're paying for is Roundup, gasoline to mow, weed whack, and to run the generators, and then paint to continue painting the above ground, underground, and then the assembly building. And then we're going to start needing money for the displays. We do have a work day every 4th Saturday from 9 to 12. Anybody wants to come out, feel free. If you come out for your first time, if you never had a tour of the site at the end of the workday, I put you to work first. And then afterwards, we give you a tour of the site. If there's a group of you, or you have a group who wants to come out and do some work, I retire in 5 weeks. And after this week, it'll be 4 weeks. And then so I'll be spending more time down there. So we can set up group events that we can go down there. So there is on Facebook, there's a site where I post updates as we work on stuff. So you can go find that and you can join. It's a private group, but I let anybody join. If you're interested in a private tour, just send me an email or send me a text. We can set up a private tour. I had a couple who were coming down. They just saw the gate open. They heard about this place. They were coming down to see if they could look at it. I told them I had to leave, but we could set up a private tour later. They got like 9 of their buddies, their friends, and they came and I gave them a tour. They gave me a nice little donation. It all worked out good. And I did create, if you guys have heard of escape rooms, I created a Nike challenge that I need somebody to help test it. So basically it's a challenge that you have to prepare a missile for launch within a certain amount of time. And there's 9 challenges you have to do. So it gives you one of the challenges, you have to be able to get into the pit, and then you have to do a bunch of challenges to get back out of the pit. So, and then usually I'm looking at teams from 4 to 6. So if anybody wants to help me test this, I would appreciate it. So that's all I have. There's my contact information at the bottom. Or you can reach out to Bill. Bill can get a hold of me. Any questions?
Hi. So Tom, have you ever brought a Geiger counter down there? Did you have to have it inspected as well before you could get in there?
It was inspected, and we did actually went out and the state had inspected it. We have all the documents that they went down and checked it all out. Not worried about nuclear waste. I mean, these missiles, the warheads came in contained. They were never worked there. Not worried about any kind of radiation leaks. Now, I did hear some stories that they would sit on top of the warhead and fix it and work on it and stuff like that. And, you know, some cancers in some bad places. But again, those are the stories. More concerned, and they did check for any kind of asbestos and any kind of chemicals, stuff like that. Now, again, Joe Zhang, who was there, he said, yeah, we killed a couple of other cows. Because this is back in the 50s and 60s. They weren't, you know, environmental protection and stuff like that. So I'm guessing they did a couple spills and the cows, I'm assuming the cows drank something they should have. Because he said we had killed a couple cows, but he didn't go into detail. So, but
Also, have you looked into a grant or a mini grant to help you all?
we're now part of, like you probably know, we're part of the Patasco Greenway.
Mhm.
So again, I would love to take advantage of that. We have not.
Okay.
Especially when it comes to, I think they had some small grants and stuff for like doing displays and stuff like that. So that's one thing I would like to make. One of the pictures you saw that battery B sign. I would love to get that recreated and have one down there, but then also have one at the front gate.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
Tom,
Yeah.
can you tie the history in at all to the trailer park that's up Davis Avenue? Which supposedly was put there to house the military, the members of the military at the base.
No, I don't know about that.
You know about that?
Other sites did have base housing. Some of the sites actually had houses. You can actually go down like Nike Street and there's, remains of housing that they built for the folks there. But I'd like to learn more about that.
Well, there wasn't that kind of housing around here, of course, at the time. But the trailer park is still there, and it's remarkable simply because there are hardly any trailer parks anywhere. And that one remains here. John, can you tell us about
The
that?
trailer park was not put there. It wasn't tied to the Nike site per
It
se.
wasn't?
The Mathena family put that there as a venture.
Uh-huh.
Now, one of the stimuluses for doing that was that there was this influx of young men into the neighborhood, many of whom, needed someplace to live. But it wasn't part of the, the official setup. Tom, I always said that from a historian's point of view, the most significant effect of the Nike site on Granite had nothing to do with missiles. It was that there was this influx of young men into the neighborhood, for the girls here. And I know of 4 or 5 marriages, that happened because of that. And I'm sure there are some that I don't know about. But that was really the most important effect of the whole thing, to tell you the truth, from my point of view anyway.
Can I ask
So
one
you
more,
guys-
sorry. One more quick question, Tom. You mentioned Chicago as being one of the areas where this kind of missile defense was installed. And one of the things I was going to ask you about is if you know what they put there. Did they put the Hercules there? I happened to be a student in Chicago in the mid to late 60s. And I was driving along Lakeshore Drive one morning, I think it was 1967, and all the missiles came up. All of those, and I think they were Hercules from what you've shown.
Yeah, they were.
And that
They would have been
was all
Hercules.
It was Hercules?
Yeah, because by 67, the Ajax were pretty much decommissioned and it was all Hercules.
So the Fifth Army was doing that out of Fort Sheridan?
Yeah, I have a book behind me. All right. So it's called Rings of Supersonic Steel. And
Oh,
so, yeah, if you tell me, it will say in here, it has all the units and so I have Chicago in here and it will show where the sites were and what missiles they had at each site.
okay, we'll take a look. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, what's interesting, I think there's a C-94 and they're trying to fix that up. And so they joined my group. And so every so often we're talking about how hard it is to find stuff out there anymore. Because again, it's been 40 plus years, 50 plus years now since it's closed. So,
Well, that's an image that will remain.
Yes.
Me seeing all those missiles rising up along the lake. And it was remarkable.
yeah, there's a good story out there where some folks were golfing they were visiting this golf course and they were golfing, and all of a sudden they heard the alarms go off, and they look over and they see the missiles coming out of the ground, and they hightailed it back to the golf course, the club, and everybody's just laughing at them because I guess it happens all the time.
Annalise, you had a question?
Yes, I grew up in Westport, Connecticut, and we had a Nike site up by the high school. And I had to come down here to learn about Nike site, because they wouldn't let us anywhere near it as teenagers or high schoolers. And I enjoyed your presentation because now finally I know what was behind the
What they were
fence.
doing.
Yeah, there's
So
a place
that-
down
That
right
would be
above
in that book.
Annapolis. Go ahead, sorry.
That would be listed in the book you just showed?
Yeah, should be.
Okay,
Yeah, send me the locations, or give it to Bill. Bill, send me the locations and I'll look them up and I'll send you something back.
thank you.
Tom, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe not a question so much as just expressing how, maybe I shouldn't be astonished, but just, so when the base closed down, they just walked away, off the fence and just left it, fuel in the tanks and closed the doors? Was there no sort of plan or process?
We don't know when they pulled everything out. We're assuming they pulled the missiles out in 74, but when we went down there, everything's gone. So, I mean, they pretty much gutted everything. It's kind of weird. We're going to one pit and you still see the hydraulic pumps in there. You go to another pit, everything's gone. You go to another pit, there's one hydraulic motor there and that's it. So, but for the most part, everything got yanked out, and I think what was kind of left was like the underground tanks and stuff. Now there is one above ground tank down by the generator that I'm assuming is totally empty, but that's still sitting out there. So again, when they close everything down, like all the missiles, they pretty much either recycled them. The warheads, they needed the material, so they reused all that. So, but yeah, they pretty much, the Army National Guard kept it for a while, but they used it as supply, used it other things. We don't know if it was the Army National Guard or the state used some of the pits to store, because they actually had a kind of so people wouldn't fall into the well. So that was in there, but yeah, pretty much emptied out.
So you said that they had to do some remediation. Was it assessed by EPA, like a Superfund assessment at that point? And they found that stuff?
I don't think it was a super fun, because again, the only thing that would have been there would be if they had hydraulics fluid, or some of the fuel for the Ajax might have get in there. If there's anything major, and they did test everything. And there's actually one of the elevators had written inspected 2007, just on there. But one of our historians who's since moved on, he went and got the whole packet. I have to go find it. It wasn't major. I mean, it wasn't a super fun site. They had to clean stuff up. It was more of a check to make sure it was all okay. And again, it was built in the 50s. So again, I'm sure there was lead paint and I'm sure there was asbestos. What's nice for us is all the pits were pretty much underwater. So almost all the paint has dissolved. So
Into the groundwater?
by groundwater. What's interesting is it's not groundwater, it's rainwater. It
Oh,
doesn't.
okay,
It leaks when it
I
rains.
feel better. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really it was clear, and then we thought it would go down there and get real moldy and stuff. It's not moldy. It actually doesn't smell bad unless you have a real sensitive nose. I don't think it smells bad at all. The water was very clear. So, but yeah, there was the two tanks above ground, up near the buildings. I'm guessing they were used for fuel for the heaters. That's what had to get yanked out.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more quick question. Go ahead, David.
What kind of paint do you use on the metal, on the steel?
I'm using Rust-Oleum because I made a comment in a Carroll County Times came out and did a section for us, whole page, really nice. Baltimore Sun picked it up, Washington Post picked it up. I just made some comment about Rust-Oleum is very expensive. So Rust-Oleum reached out to me and it's
My.
$2,000 worth of paint. So
Awesome.
I'm using Rust-Oleum.
All righty, thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate you taking the time. It was very enjoyable. And if anybody has any further questions, just send them to me and I will pass them along. So I will end the recording at this point